G'day guys, I'm Jack and this is my 2000 Land Rover Discovery 2 and today we're going to tackle the job of replacing the turbo cartridge. So the first thing we'll do is we'll take the intake pipe off, and first of all we'll take the vacuum line, take the clips off the MAF and the plug. We'll grab a flat blade screwdriver to get the hose clamp off the front of the turbo, and then we'll move this whole pipe out of the way. We'll just sit that out of the way for a minute. We're going to put that back on later once we've done the job. So the next step would be to take the intercooler pipe off. So just get a screwdriver, or that's also an 8mm socket you can put on that hose clamp. We'll just unscrew that and then pop it right off and sit that out of the way until we're done. One of the main reasons to replace a turbo cartridge, aside from preventative maintenance, is if you've got an excessive amount of shaft play. That side to side would indicate a worn bearing, and if we don't replace that before it gets even worse, it could be catastrophic. So next step, we'll take this hose off the wastegate actuator. Before we take the turbo off the manifold and the exhaust pipe, we want to be able to take the oil feed banjo bolt off and the oil return pipe bolts off. So now I have the oil feed pipe removed and also the oil drain pipe removed. And next is to do the manifold bolts and the exhaust bolts. So now I've got the turbo removed from the manifold. It's just the 3 exhaust stud bolts, and then the turbo will come out. And there it is. So the next thing to do once it's on the table would be to remove the wastegate actuator. You also need to remove this little circlip off the wastegate actuating rod to get the wastegate actuator off. Alright, so now we're going to take the rear housing and the front housing off the turbo. So that's the front housing, the O-ring seal, and that's the compressor wheel. So as you can see here, there's a bit of wear on the fins where it's been contacting the housing from shaft play. So I'll give you a better example of that once I pull the new one out of the box and show you the difference. So sometimes the cartridge is a bit stuck in the exhaust side housing, so giving the housing a little bit of a tap with a hammer just knocks that loose and it comes right out. I'm just going to give the intake side turbo housing a bit of a clean because it's got a bit of an oil build-up in there from the blow-by gases of the motor. So I'm just going to give the surface where the O-ring seals for the new cartridge, going to give that a bit of a clean so I can get a nice seal and there's no chance of boost leaks. I'm just using a microfiber cloth here. Pretty much use any sort of rag, I guess, to just get any sort of imperfections like oil build-up or dirt and grime out of there, just so we can get a nice seal. Okay, so this is my new turbo core to replace this old worn out one. So I've got my oil return seal in there, as well as my O-ring seal. And this is my shiny new turbo cartridge. So as you can see, with the old one, there's quite a bit of wearing on the fins here. On the new one, perfect. So the benefit over buying a completely new core versus rebuilding your stock one would be that it's very time consuming to pull these apart and replace all the seals and bearings and nuts and bolts and all that sort of stuff. And even after all that, you still have to get it balanced. With this one, they're actually relatively cheap. This is 150 AU off eBay, and it comes balanced out of the box. You just chuck it in your housings, chuck it back in the car, and you're ready to go. So we're just going to chuck the O-ring over the new cartridge. This can be fiddly, but it does go on. Wipe my greasy fingerprints off the O-ring there to ensure a good seal. I'm going to take the front compressor housing. I'm going to mate it with the new core, making sure that O-ring doesn't slip out while we do it. Now I'm going to attach the front housing and the new cartridge to the rear housing. Being very careful to not damage that propeller wheel on the way in the housing. So something I forgot to mention earlier when I was taking apart the turbo was to make sure you mark on the housings where the oil feed line goes on top of the turbo, and that way it means your front housing and your rear housing are going to be in the right orientation to each other, because these housings do, once these bolts are loosened, they can freely spin over the cartridge. And that means that if you don't mark the housings and you just chuck this all back in, the turbo intake side could be pointing the wrong direction. So what we do is we just make sure we've marked. So I've put a little mark here on the intake side and on the exhaust side. Make sure it's all going to be in line, so when we put it back together, the orientation is going to be correct. So now it's time to put the turbo back in. And before we do that, we make sure we've got a new gasket for the exhaust side, a new gasket for the manifold side. We've got a new gasket for the oil return, and we also have new copper washers for the oil feed, and that ensures we have no exhaust leaks or oil leaks. So when putting the turbo back in, it can be kind of fiddly to get the turbo studs to line up with the manifold and the exhaust studs to line up with the exhaust side. So the exhaust got a bit of play in it, so you can sort of wiggle it around, just get those studs all in there, and you can see it's now lined up and ready to be bolted up. The turbo is back on now. I need to put the 3 nuts on the manifold, the 3 nuts on the exhaust, the 2 bolts on the oil return, and the banjo bolt and the 2 copper washers on the oil feed line back on, and then I can put the intake hose back on, the intercooler hose back on, and all these vacuum lines and boost lines back on, and that would complete the install. So something to remember is that the reinstall is just basically the reversal of how you took it off. So as long as you can remember those steps, reinstalling is very simple, probably the most fun part too, very satisfying to watch it all go back together. Alright guys, there it is. Cartridge is installed, it's all back together. Now it's ready to fire up.